Hello, everyone. Fantastic. I think we're going to get started. Hello, my name is Roisin Taylor, and I'm one of the co-directors, the very lucky co-directors of UK Youth for Nature, which is the UK's leading youth network calling on the government to take action on nature loss, which is something that we're all here to have a discussion about today. Thank you so much for coming along. I'm going to give you a bit of an introduction to who we are, what we're talking about this evening, the kind of context of freshwater pollution, and then we're going to jump into some questions for the panel. We've got a fantastic panel tonight, so I'm really excited to hear them all speak. And then there's going to be an opportunity for about 15 minutes worth of questions at the end before we jump on to a 5-minute intro to a very exciting campaign moment from the Rivers Trust with the big River Watch coming this weekend. So yes, as I've already said, the UK Youth for Nature is a fantastic youth group of 16 to 35-year-olds, and we're really chuffed to be working alongside the Rivers Trust to run this event today. We have been leading a campaign called Not So Freshwater for the last year. It's a 2-3 year campaign. And as you can imagine, it tackles the very current topic of freshwater pollution in the UK. But rather than just thinking and focusing on sewage, we're focusing a bit more widely on the role of agricultural pollutants in ecosystem kind of breakdown in our freshwater ecosystems. And that's because we know that freshwater ecosystems in the UK are internationally important. The UK's freshwater network is made up of a staggering 200,000 kilometres of streams and rivers, plus the inevitable thousands of ponds and lakes and ditches all across the UK, forming a cross habitat that support a diverse array of wildlife. Our freshwater systems should be one of the jewels in our landscape in the UK. And yet no rivers in England, Wales or Northern Ireland are considered to be in high ecological health. And in Scotland, 92% of rivers do not meet that high ecological health standard. Agricultural waste, such as farm slurry, fertiliser runoff, and the impact of harsh toxic chemicals is, we know, putting an enormous pressure on our freshwater environments. And agricultural pollution from rural areas is currently affecting 40% of water bodies in England. But creating more space for nature can have a huge impact, and repairing freshwater barriers and reducing the use and toxicity of pesticides in these landscapes can have a huge impact for biodiversity and for the public alike. So tonight, we're going to be discussing the fact that nature is a powerful tool to help us return our rivers to a natural, healthy state again, and the resultant benefits to biodiversity, community, and health, which are so vital to our future. So without further ado, I'd ask my 3 lovely panelists to turn their video on, and I'm going to ask them to give us a quick introduction to who they are and what their role is, and then we'll jump into questions. So we've got Sam Kenyon from the Nature Friendly Farming Network. We've got Nick Allen joining us from the National Trust, who I think is at my local spot in Wallington, outside Newcastle, and then Molly Bedell from the wonderful Knepp Estate. So Sam, should we start with you? Give us a bit of an introduction to who you are and what you do.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm Sam. I farm on the River Elwy in North Wales. I'm also vice chair of the Nature Friendly Farming Network in Wales. So we have quite a small farm here. It's only 160 acres with 80 acres of productive land. And we've got 2 kilometres of main river running through that. So we've got quite a bit of riverbank to look after. And the river means that we have to learn to work with nature and find nature-based solutions. So yeah, that's me.
Amazing. Molly?
Thanks, Roisin. Yeah, so I'm Molly Bedell. I work at Knepp as the head of natural capital. So that is essentially helping Knepp tap into emerging nature finance opportunities, markets for ecosystem services. I'm working really closely with the team at Knepp who are doing all the wonderful nature restoration that they're doing, working on the rewilding project and also working on the regen farm as well. I am the facilitator for our local farm cluster around Knepp. So there's also lots of work going on at scale, which is super interesting, working with farmers locally too.
Fab. And Nick, what about yourself?
Hi, yeah, thanks, Roisin. I'm Nick. I'm a ranger at the Wallington Estate in Northumberland, which is a 14,000 acre estate owned by the National Trust. There's 9 rangers at Wallington, and we do everything from countryside management, so fence and repairs, walling repairs, all the way to species conservation, habitat management, and forestry. So yeah, that's me.
Amazing. So as you can see, we've got a fantastic panel this evening with a range of experience and kind of experience in different stakeholder engagement as well, which I think is vital when we're talking about rivers, which tend to kind of cross through, sorry, apologies, that's my partner texting me very rudely, through kind of multiple landscapes. And so it's vital to engage with those stakeholders. I'd love to talk about a particular example from each of your areas that you think is a really good example of nature-based solutions, or something that you just love engaging with on a farm scale or on a massive restoration scale. Can I start with Sam, please?
Hey, yeah, so one of the things that I love that we've done here at Glanflyn is we've restored a lot of our riverbanks. So the farm, we've only been here about 6 or 7 years, and the farm used to be tenanted, and a tenant was growing maize on the fields. So it would flood by winter when there wasn't a crop on the land to hold the soil in place. So we'd see a lot of erosion. When we first came here, we had a couple of fields that were still in pasture. So when those flooded, I noticed that they were actually building up in sediment and nutrition and soil, and my other fields, without any crop on them at all, were washing away and were actually getting lower. So we lost a lot of field edge. We lost probably about 14 meters off of one field in 4 years due to 3 huge floods that we had. And I just figured, well, I can't buy land as cheap as I could save it from washing away. We took the land out of tenancy. We sowed pasture everywhere, herbal lays, and we've put in buffer strips, and then we've coppiced willow trees and then buried them into a bank. So we scraped the bank back to 30 degrees or just under 30 degrees, so that the slope, instead of being like a vertical drop where the water would wash away the soil underneath and the top would collapse in, we scraped it back, and then we buried whole trees in the ground, and they have acted as root balls for fresh regrowth of willow. And then we didn't sow any seeds, and in the first year we did a biodiversity survey, and we had 20 species of plant growing as well as the willow trees. So it's been amazing for saving our riverbanks, which has then acted as a buffer strip to save the fields.
That is an absolutely incredible story of being able to use kind of tree logs to work as regrowth. That's fantastic. And willow is such a fantastic example of flood management tool. Nick, what about yourself on the Wallington estate?
Yeah, so it's been pretty exciting over the last couple of months because we've reintroduced a family of 4 beavers onto the estate. So yeah, in terms of like a nature-based solution, it doesn't get more natural than just dropping an animal in that does all of the work for you, basically. So yeah, we've got 4. We've got a mum and a dad, an adolescent, and a little kid. And in 2 months, they've already built 3 dams and created a pretty impressive area of wetland already in like I say, just a couple of months. So yeah, they've wetted out an area of farm that we got back in hand. And yeah, the difference has been absolutely incredible. We've got native white-clawed crayfish, which are obviously an endangered species. We've got them up at Wallington. So we're working with partners like the Environment Agency to see how white-clawed crayfish populations are affected by beavers. So it's not just about obviously bringing the beavers back in, and we know what beavers do. They dam up, they create wetlands, they're a keystone species, but also how they affect other species, because at the moment there's no areas where beavers have been reintroduced, but then seen how they affect white-clawed crayfish. So that's a really interesting study. So yeah, we'll be interested to see what the beavers do. I'm sure Molly at Knepp will be able to tell you more about beavers than me because they've had them a lot longer. But yeah, that's probably the biggest, most exciting nature-based solution that Wallington's done so far.
It's incredible how quickly nature rushes back in when you bring nature back. It's absolutely amazing, and also a bit of a sound of hope, which we all need at the moment. Molly, what about yourself on Knepp Estate?
So mine is very similar to Nick's because it's based around the beavers. Unsurprisingly, they are just amazing. But it's interesting to hear from you, Nick, because it's different in different contexts, I think. The River Ada goes through Knepp, and famously we've done some river restoration over the past sort of 20 years. So we did some remeandering. We've also planted some nice riparian planting up the sides of the river, which is working really well. That's for a kind of shade specifically for fish. So that's fantastic. And then our beaver project at Knepp has been a story of mixed success. I don't know, when we first introduced beavers, we introduced an unbonded pair, and they went opposite directions up the catchment. So that was not a successful nature-based solution. But we managed to bring a new pair in about 2 years ago. And what they have done, I echo Nick's kind of amazement. They are incredible. And we've actually put them on a very small tributary to the River Ada. So it was tiny, little ditch, not a huge piece of water at all. And within 2 years, they've dammed it up to create this amazing, beautiful wetland, which is just humming with life in a way that the rest of Knepp is, but it's a very kind of special wetland feel to the area. And it's incredible. It's done great things for obviously water retention. Last year, when there was such a huge drought, we felt like the rest of Knepp just felt like it was dry concrete, but where the beavers were, they'd created this beautiful wet seam, which was really lovely. And then very excitingly, well, two exciting things. Number one, we found a sea trout swimming in the beaver hot pen, which was really impressive because it meant they'd got up and over some hammer pond sort of barriers. So that was impressive. And then even more excitingly, about 3 months ago, we realized that we had beaver kits, which is great because we really wanted them to breed. So they bred on site quite quickly, really happy at Knepp. And I think, the water retention that they've done, the water purification, and then that creation of a sort of very, very special habitat. And we've got more scrub growing up where they've taken down trees. So we've got carbon sequestration happening. So it's really, really fantastic. And what's exciting on the River Ada is we've now got a collaborative landscape scale project going down the whole of the river with 30 farmers from the top to the bottom, funded by the top tier of elms. So it's a landscape recovery project to try and look at the whole of the River Ada as a system. So hopefully we can continue that exciting work.
That sounds absolutely amazing. I'd love to hear more, probably in the next question, actually, about the shading work for fish, because that sounds fascinating. Okay, I think we're going to throw into our first set of questions then. So why is it so important for riverbanks to be natural and full of nature? I'm going to throw that one to Nick. What is it about, the need for riverbanks to be natural and full of nature that makes this whole conversation so special?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose the answer to that could apply to any habitat, but particularly riverbanks and wetland. It's the need for species diversity. We've got so many broken ecosystems in this country. It's one of the most nature depleted countries in Europe, and the need for diversity is there. It's needed for a lot of reasons, but to try and fix some of those broken ecosystems. What we've got at the National Trust, particularly at Wallington and across National Trust properties, I suppose, is we run our sort of business through people coming to visit these places. So if we've got the river walk at Wallington is a beautiful river walk. If we've got a river walk that is this muddy, sludgy kind of mess with unbordered farm fields either side of it that isn't there's nothing to see. We like to think that by creating habitats and creating a really, really diverse and lush river bank, and that one example down at Wallington, you're going to be inspiring the sort of next generation of kids coming up and young people who are going to be coming along this riverbank thinking, wow, this is absolutely fantastic. I've seen a dragonfly, I've seen an otter, I've seen a white-clawed crayfish. I've seen all of these fantastic species. We've got a bridge down on the river at Wallington called Trout Bridge. It's just specifically named that for the reason that you can just stand on it, look down, and you're pretty much guaranteed to see trout back and forth. So I think species diversity is key, but you've got to think why do we want that? What are we getting out of that? The natural world's getting something. But also, our visitors and people and young people, particularly the next generation, are hopefully coming to Wallington and feeling completely inspired. And I just wanted to add to the sort of beaver conversation that we had before. For me, it's the immediate wins that you get with projects like this as well. I spent hundreds of hours in the beaver enclosure, before the beavers were introduced. And like I say, we got it back from a tenanted farmer who'd retired. spent 100 of hours in that beaver enclosure, and hadn't really seen much in terms of diversity. You know, you're right, on one side of it is semi-natural ancient woodland, but the other side, literally the farm field comes right up to the river, and I hadn't really seen much. And last week I was at the beaver enclosure 2 days in a row, and I saw 2 kingfishers straight. I'd never seen a kingfisher down there before. No one had seen a kingfisher down there in a very, very, very long time. And then to just see 2 in 2 days is just that immediate win, isn't it? So yeah, I suppose we're doing it for the natural world, and we're doing it for species diversity and to fix broken ecosystems, but we're also doing it for people to see, for people to engage with, and to inspire the next generation. I think it's the most important thing.
I think that point of inspiration is so vital to what we all do as kind of campaigners. Sam and Molly, in your work, what kind of role does that inspiration play? Because, you know, in the farming sector, it's so wonderful to be out on a farm and talking with a farmer about the wildlife that they're seeing in their landscape. So do you feel that point of connection is really, really vital for something that, you know, we're talking about with rivers in particular as a particular case study, but in moving this movement forward, is that kind of vital to you both in your areas of work? And please do jump in, by the way.
All I was going to add to that was it's so vital. I think it's really important because we're bringing such a collection of stakeholders together, and increasingly, particularly from a Knepp angle, we're working with corporates, we're working with ENGOs, we're working with the local community. You know, we've got to bring everyone together with a collective vision. And what I think is really interesting is the idea of how do you illustrate what you're trying to achieve. And that's actually where, and it sounds very mundane, but photos and illustrations and beautiful illustrations are really important, because if you don't know what a restored river can look like, you don't know what you're trying to achieve. And it's not, I remember that I didn't fully appreciate that a river shouldn't be canalized until I saw some really beautiful pictures of what they could look like, and, you know, beautiful kind of capturing the imagination pictures. So I think it's in the storytelling and in the display is really important in order that we can bring everyone together. So yeah, completely.
For me, the inspiration is probably seeing nature react to the good that you do, the good work that you do on the land. So I'm lucky enough that we have kingfishers, dippers, and they can be seen every day. I think we're talking about stakeholders. For me, it's important to think of Mother Nature as being sort of head of the board table in every decision that I make on the farm. Because if I don't work with nature, she's going to make sure I pay the price. You know, I've got woodland, I've got pasture, I've got the river. I'm either going to flood or I'm going to have trees falling down everywhere. It's going to cost me a lot. Another inspiring thing for me is working. So I've had 2 digger drivers come and do work on the farm. And at first they looked at me like I was mad and needed my head seeing too. Most farmers would be asking them to sort of straighten the river, to take out meanders, take out the oxbow lake, just to get the water away quicker. So it was really inspiring to see them do the work, go along with what I said, and actually be really impressed with what's happened, and now quietly talking to other farmers about it. I think we can get a bit of a bad rap as farmers for what we're doing. I know why a lot of us perhaps don't do best practice and perhaps aren't as responsible as we could be. I think we've all got a responsibility, but we can't all afford to execute that responsibility and best practice. So yeah, I think if there's a way of inspiring us to do it with nature-based solutions to help save on costs, then yeah, happy to be part of that inspiration.
Yeah,
And
go on, Roy.
Sorry, can I add a really quick thing that I thought that's a nice example of kind of for those people who aren't, like, obviously we're fortunate to be able to go out and actually experience that nature-based solution on the ground, and that is amazing. And you know, you get to see the nature that's abundant, and it's incredible. But one thing we have done at Knepp, which I think is quite powerful, is we've set up a beaver radio. So we've put in an above above the river and below the river microphones, and it's with the University of Sussex. And that is capturing, we put them in at the start when we put the beavers in, and we're capturing the soundscape of how the abundance in nature creates a louder sound throughout the time. And I think it's thinking about those types of ways as how we can engage other people who don't have access to the site and take nature to people's houses. That's quite important as well. So
yeah, it's absolutely vital. We do a lot of that work at UK Youth for Nature, trying to think creatively how about we can tell those stories, which is really important to reach people who might not have access to these spaces. It's really vital. So let's talk about maybe slightly more contentious topics. We've had a lot of discussion about the topic of net zero in the news. It's very, very relevant, both politically, economically, and socially. So what is the importance of nature-based solutions to the contribution of net zero? Is it a real kind of winner for everybody involved? Are there barriers to this in particular? I might come to you, Sam, first.
Yeah, I'm by no means expert in being net zero, but I recently did a carbon calculation with Trinity Ag. I chose to go with them because they take into account the species mix that you have on the farm, so in the hedgerows, in the woodland, in your buffer strips, in your pasture even, rather than most calculators which just look at how much crop you produce and how much fossil fuel you've had to burn to get that. They actually took like the natural infrastructure of the farm into account. And I couldn't believe that we were 142 tons of carbon in credit. Yeah, which they were amazed by, because like we don't even have a tractor. I try to, I think traditionally we're a small farm. Unfortunately, it washes its face, it pays its way, but both me and my husband have to work off farm to earn a living. And so it was really important for us that we manage the farm as low input as we can, and then using the animals regeneratively as a tool to help us increase biodiversity and keep their health status high. And that was amazing to see it play out on a spreadsheet in a carbon calculation. It was just like, just amazing, pat on the back for the way we're doing things.
Yeah, absolutely. Molly, what about at Knepp Estate? You're working specifically on natural capital, which speaks very much to the kind of contribution of net zero. What is your experience of this in the Knepp world?
Yeah, so Knepp is a nature first entity. So it's all about, if you said to me, what's the core ecosystem service that Knepp is generating, what's the core benefit? It's the biodiversity uplift that we're creating. But we've always known that with the creation of the iconic successionary scrub that Knepp is known for, that's created all these amazing ecological niches for animals and biodiversity at large, we knew that we were sequestering carbon. But there wasn't any data around exactly how much carbon we were sequestering, because not many places have that type of landscape. So it's really exciting. We're just coming to the end of a 2-year project that we've done with a whole load of different partners, Tree Economy, Queen Mary University, Arup, etc., to try and actually quantify, and agri-carbon importantly, to try and quantify how much carbon is within our rewilded scrub. And we've been looking at both the soil carbon, so the carbon sequestered within the soil under the scrub, and the scrub itself, but both the above ground and the below ground woody biomass. So it includes not just what you see, but also the roots, essentially. And we've done lots and lots and lots of analysis, lots of soil core samples, and lots of destructive sampling of the scrub itself to try and work out exactly how much carbon's in there. And we have been astounded by the figures. It's double what we've ever predicted, which is really exciting. We can't tell you what the figures are yet because it's just going hopefully through peer review paper so that we can come out and say, look, this is what, Knepp is known for, its rewilded scrub creating lots of brilliant positive impact for biodiversity, but it's also doing amazing things for carbon sequestration. So we know that the nature-based solutions that we're delivering at Knepp are really critical to absorbing carbon. The other thing that I think is really important in terms of net zero is the nature-based solutions and allowing natural processes to take place is creating an environment that's much more climate resilient. So we're letting the species thrive that are likely to thrive in the next 50 years because we're not dictating what that looks like. So I think climate resilience is just as important as carbon sequestration. But I think it would be very short-sighted to look at net zero and not think about nature-based solutions. The two have to go hand in hand.
Yeah, I totally agree. As somebody who's studying climate change adaptation and the farming world, I could not agree more about resilience being vital for all of our kind of thought processes. Molly, I'm going to go straight back to you for this next question, because we've talked about carbon sequestration and thinking about net zero, but in what way can nature, and I want to caveat this carefully with when the Dasgupta report came out and we had this big conversation about the economic benefits of nature, there was a real split in kind of folk who feel that nature should just be, that's its value, its intrinsic value is just existing, and our experience of it should not be economic. And then there were those that were saying, actually, in order to protect it, we need to think about the economic value of it so we know what we can do more about it. So that's the caveat for this question, which is, in what way can nature and nature-based solutions be of benefit to the economy? And again, through your natural capital work, that's happening quite a lot. But I'd also love to speak to Nick through your kind of more local lens and your visitor economy, and Sam maybe through the kind of economy of farming. But I'll start with Molly. Yeah, in what way can it be of benefit to the economy?
So many, because obviously our natural capital underpins our whole economy anyway, and that's the whole thinking around natural capital and trying to understand it. So I think you can distill it down to three things, which probably I'm sure Nick and Sam will elaborate on and make much clearer. But the first one I would say is business resilience. And so that comes back to that idea of the benefits that nature-based solutions can provide are low cost, and they're effective, and they're resilient. And things like nature-based solutions to reduce the impact of flooding, nature-based solutions to increase your water retention, as we've seen through beavers, and also biodiversity increase to help with pollination. All of those sorts of things will have co-benefits for your existing businesses. So I think that intrinsic idea and thinking about natural capital as a way to reduce our operational risks, investing in natural capital equals investing in business resilience. I think that's really important. The second one is through these exciting, but fundamentally quite capitalist, ecosystem service markets. So whether that's enabling more nature-based solutions because you're selling carbon credits, or you're selling biodiversity units, so a biodiversity net gain, or you're selling biodiversity credits to a global biodiversity market. So that is the literal marketization of the services that nature is providing. And they're very contentious because they sit very closely to greenwashing, obviously. I think from my perspective, what's exciting is I'm working directly with projects that I know are delivering fantastic nature-based solutions. And actually, I just see this as an opportunity to provide an income stream that will now allow us to do more. So just as if we were using Knepp to produce food, we'd be receiving money for that service. We are using Knepp to produce biodiversity and carbon, and how can we get paid for that? So emerging ecosystem service markets are definitely, I think, fundamental to the future of the green economy. And then the third point, in terms of how does nature-based solutions help the economy, would be around social benefit, which I think you said Nick might speak to a bit, but, particularly at Knepp, got a 1 million turnover ecotourism business that wouldn't exist without the huge nature-based solution that is the rewilding experiment. But it's not just the benefit of ecotourism itself. I think it's also the benefit of knowledge. The amount of knowledge that's been generated through the nature-based solutions is incredible, and education and access to nature, and obviously public health. So those are my three key ways I think nature-based solutions help the economy.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And Nick, I'd love to talk to you about localizing this a little bit. So particularly thinking about Wallington, and you've spoken about visitor attraction and the importance of kind of inspiration, but on a sort of more local scale and maybe a community scale, what benefit do you think that nature and kind of nature-based solutions we've already articulated can be to that local economy as well, or even to just the kind of economy within the National Trust site?
Yeah, I mean, where Wallington sits in Northumberland, we've got the River Wansbeck flowing through it, which eventually hits a town called Morpeth. You'll know Roisin, obviously, being from around here. Now, Morpeth is really liable to flooding. So in 2008, I think it had a really, really bad flood. Now, the flood defences that came in after that cost £27 million of taxpayer money. Now, what we hope to achieve at Wallington, obviously, is by keeping that floodwater higher up in the catchment. That is going to be a massive win economically. You know, I mean, I know when that £27 million came in and was spent, they had to get an enormous machine from Germany to put this this thing into the one spec in Morpeth, which then got stuck in France for some reason. Anyway, my point being, it took way longer than the thought. This thing had to come from way further away than the thought. You know, all of that, all of those fossil fuels being burned, transporting this thing to get it in place. Where with nature-based solutions, you know, we can hold that water up a lot more. So if you're talking, you know, purely money, flood defences are a lot more expensive to put in and maintain than planning for the future and future-proofing catchment areas higher up. Our entire beaver project from start to finish costs £100,000 versus, you know, 27 million. That's a really broad thing, because I know that 4 beavers on their own aren't going to stop Morpeth from flooding. But this is the type of thing that we've got to focus on. And in terms of, you know, like carbon credits, I don't know what the National Trust's policy is on selling their carbon credits and sequestration. But I've got down here that the Wallington Estate, this is information's been given to me by someone that knows a lot more than me, so I can't take credit for this. But Wallington's 14,000 acres and it stores 1.26 million tons of carbon, because we've got a massive area of blanket peat bog at the north side of the estate. So, you know, as well as the economic value of what we do, also with that, with regenerating that peat bog through keeping water higher up in the catchment, that's also brilliant for the environment as well. So yeah, in terms of, you know, economy, we've touched on ecotourism, which Knepp has pretty much nailed as a concept, I think. We're at the start of that journey at Wallington, but I suppose as a National Trust property, we are ecotourism because people come here to see nature. You know, I think the National Trust itself is starting to leave behind the sort of traditional house and gardens vibe. That sort of that is still a valid business model in a lot of properties up and down the country. But what you'll tend to find now is we are moving more towards bringing people in for nature, not to look at a dusty old house. I'm sure the conservationists will love us saying that. But yeah, that's where the National Trust is going in general. And I think, you know, the younger generation, and not even the younger generation, you know, I know sort of generations maybe above me as well are sort of slowly generally having their opinions changed, hopefully, and will want to be coming to places like this for the natural side of things more. So yeah, as a business model, we're definitely changing that, and I think that's definitely the way to go, because it's only going one way at the end of the day. I mean, you know, nature-based solutions and the economy and the economic value of them go hand in hand, and there's no getting around that. That is the way it is.
Yeah, absolutely. And Sam, so I should have said this early on. So I'm a nature-friendly flower farmer, and last year we had both flooding because of the where the river was on our flower farm, and then we also had major drought, which, as you can imagine, for, as we've already discussed, sort of small margins of income, that can be really devastating. So from a farming kind of perspective, what kind of benefits or what entanglement is there between nature-based solutions and kind of the farming and food and fibre kind of economy?
Well, to put it crudely, I can't afford to not work with nature. So the small farm business economic benefits are that by resourcing sort of tools from the land, the resources from the land, like the willow trees and that, it's helping to save costs to us on the farm. It's helping, if we put a price tag on the land as well, it's helping by integrating, you know, nature-based solutions with trying to fix our freshwater system and capturing carbon into our soils on the farm. My livestock are thriving. I'm saving on vet bills and any medication that the animals might need, just because they're that much healthier. On a larger, wider scale, I'd like to really see farmers sort of become the heroes of the moment, because like we've got this land that could store so much water, Like we've got our biggest field is 27 acres, which is, you know, I come from Sussex originally, from a 1,000-acre council farm, council-owned farm, and so one of the smallest fields was 40 acres. So to end up in North Wales and be saying that my biggest field is 27 acres, I know a lot of people will scoff at that. I used to be one of those, but it's on the wrong side of the river to work it in winter, because the river, the height of the water in winter is too high to get across. So I figured that that field might as well earn its keep as a flood storage area. So we're actually going to create a load of scrapes and leaky dams so that the 2 tributaries that run through the woodlands just above that field feed into the field rather than straight down into the river. And we're doing that off our own back. I started a crowdfunder, and then thankfully I've had support from local council, because they didn't support me with my idea of having beavers on the farm. So they gave in to this one. And thankfully, yeah, with their financial help through Welsh Government, we're going to create this. But there's nothing in it for me. There's no financial, economical benefit directly to me for wanting to help save water from reaching the town downriver from us quicker, from wanting to help slow the flow. And I would really like to see, on a wider angle, perhaps private businesses or industry pay into nature-based solutions on farms where they can be implemented quite cheaply.
I love that idea. I think that's absolutely fantastic. You kind of picked up on some of the barriers that, you know, we have, unfortunately, not just in terms of nature-based solutions more widely, but also in terms of kind of riparian barriers and restoration of our riverbanks. So I'd love to pick up on that as our sort of final point before we go to questions, is what are some of those key barriers for us in thinking about restoring our rivers and improving our freshwater ecosystems with nature-based solutions? Who wants to jump in on that real humdinger?
I'll go quickly, just say I think there's a lot of peer pressure on us in the catchment from top to bottom. I think there's a lack of education as well, lack of training, and I think I think it's a mindset shift that's needed throughout the catchment areas. I was told to keep it a secret or not to mention to anyone else that I wanted beavers on the farm, because they could be persecuted or people think I'm more mad than they already do. And I just think that's really sad, considering how amazing they obviously are from, you know, what everyone else is saying. I just think it's really sad that we can't see that actually if we just change our mindset a little bit and share space, we can be the heroes of our time instead of the bad guys.
Yeah, I just wanted to pick up on what Sam's saying there, and what you said a little bit earlier about Sam, about farmers taking getting a bad rap and getting a bad reputation, particularly sort of like a nature conservation point of view. Farmers really get a bad rap, and we've got 14 tenant farms at Wellington, so that's like 14 families with you know 14 varying points of view on everything that we do. And I suppose it's a big barrier for us, the countryside team, because it's almost split in half. We've got 7 that are really on board and 7 that hate our guts effectively. There doesn't seem to be much much variation. It seems to be either one way or the other, and I think that sort of for rural communities that cover such huge areas, actually the communities are so small, and you'll know this, Sam, and you'll get this completely, that word gets round on lots of different things. Everybody knows everybody, and Wallington has become such a nature-based, nature-driven estate that we're called a nature accelerator property in National Trust jargon. So there's 6 or 7 across the country, and Wellington's one of them, which means that everything's happening very fast. You know, habitats are being created, money's coming in, projects are going on, trees are being planted, and it seems that people are on one side of the fence or the other, which is a really big problem, because it's causing divisions within communities as well. We've got a chap, Gary, who works on the ranger team, who's been at Wallington 40 years, and he can remember a time when, you know, a lot of farmers got on with each other. They were constantly, you know, having meetups and gatherings, and now it's almost like there's two sides of the fence have formed on nature. So I think definitely more patience required with families that have farmed the same way for hundreds and hundreds of years and haven't known anything different. And suddenly you get some conservationists coming in and saying, well, no, you need to do it this way. That's not the way to go about it. And education as well is genuinely really important. We've got some areas of the estate that have barriers for other reasons as well. So one of the big projects that we've done at the moment is we're blocking up a lot of land drains over the estate. So the estate, obviously, historically, like a lot of the country, was drained, and you look across the countryside and you've got these undulations across the field. So a lot of the work that we've been doing is blocking a lot of those up. And there's a chap that lives in a village not far away who says it's an absolute crime to block these drains because they're evidence of marvels of Victorian engineering. And you've got you know, people who work in a historical archaeological conservation, who again, you know, need you to be very careful about where you plant trees on top of cast walls and things like that. So working across interests and working across expertise is really important, and there needs to be less infighting, which is easier said than done, because everyone thinks that they're right, effectively. So yeah, I think definitely echoing what Sam said, you know, more education, but more patience and more actual doing a bit more cheerleading for farmers in terms of what they do, and maybe you know, giving everyone a break. I think farmers need to give conservationists a break, conservationists needs to give farmers a break, and there needs to be less of this two sides of the argument.
Yeah, I just want to come in there. I get it's great to have cheerleaders, but as someone who can't make a living from a farm and yet could work sort of 60-70 hours a week on it, I think we just need some money to enable us to be the change. We don't, you know, I don't have a Knepp Estate behind me. I don't have the National Trust behind me, and there's many more of us farmers in that sort of small family farm position, that actually some government support or schemes or implementation of big industry or development having to support us to make the change that's needed. You know, can cheerlead me all your life, but at the end of the day, I've got to pay
If you're skint, it doesn't matter.
to make it happen.
Yeah. Sam, I completely agree. That was going to be my number one barrier, was going to be financial incentives to do stuff. And I think that there is some really good examples of where the government are genuinely trying to instigate some projects where funding comes in properly. But it is obviously incredibly chaotic as per this government. The River Ada restoration project that I mentioned at the start, where the aim of that is to have a private marketplace whereby there's money coming in from private corporates and individuals in order to fund all of the river restoration, which would be really, really good. But I so agree with you. It's about finance, and then it is about that collaboration. And I just think it's mad I hate it when people pit farmers against environmentalists all the time, because like farmers, the environment is their asset. That's what they're working with. That's, as like you so eloquently said, Sam, that's core to everyone's business. So the idea that the two aren't, that, you know, as a farmer, you don't want to look after your soils, you don't want to stop your land from flooding, is mad. So it's education and bringing everyone together and stop being so polarized.
Yeah, more education and less ego is something that I think we need to just get more comfortable with in the country, not just in the environmental sector. I'm going to jump us onto some questions. We've got 3 in the chat, and then I'm just, while we're answering them, going to check the other chat as well. So there's the Q&A box. If you've got any questions that you really want to ask, please drop them in the Q&A box. I will also sift through the chat just to see if we've got any there. So Roseanne says, are beaver dams fish and eel pass friendly? Do we?
Yeah,
They are.
They are, yeah. Effectively, the main problem we had with the reintroduction of beavers wasn't the dams themselves, because when you think about beavers, although they haven't been in this country in like 400 years, there's been beaver skeletons found that are 30 million years old. So beavers have co-evolved with fish, eels, anything that is native to our rivers for millions of years. The main problem we had is because wild releases aren't legal in England. It's the infrastructure that you need to put around the beavers that can be the problem. So grills over the water, fences that deer and badger need to get round somehow, but beavers can't. So actually, we tend to make a rod for our own back in terms of, and I know there's a lot of problems with wild releases, and maybe we'll get there one day, but actually it's the infrastructure that we put in that can cause problems for nature, not the infrastructure that beavers create.
That's a story as old as time, I think, that one, Nick. We create our own problems. So Jeff asks, are our rivers and ecosystems really as bad as it's made out? I ask this with two thoughts in mind. Number one, the UK has a history of environmental activism, and I wonder if this activism that highlights the problems that exist elsewhere, but are not highlighting maybe the solutions, I think that means, or the good things. All our rivers, this is point number two, fail chemical standards mostly because of forever chemicals that exist in Europe, if not the world, yet we don't hear every river in France, Germany, Italy, etc. fails. So I think the kind of broad piece of that is, are we in such a dire situation? Who wants to take that one? I would personally say, Sam, I'll come to you in a second, that we know that we're one of the most nature depleted countries on the planet, which is really horrific. And we've kind of, particularly, we did some work as UK Youth for Nature about chemical cocktails and the kind of what the chemical cocktails were in our rivers, and they were found in chemical cocktails were found in over 1,000 rivers in England. And so we know, the science is there, the River Trust data kind of proves that actually things are pretty horrific, sewage aside, which we haven't even touched on. But Sam, I'll jump to you for this one.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to say that I'm no ecological expert, but one of my hobbies is fishing. So and also I occasionally go to the pub for a pint, and I meet the guys who used to poach on the river, and I've heard the stories of how many fish they used to be able to see lying up under tree roots, and there's anglers that have been mad enough to dive down and snorkel and have a look and see, and it's pretty crazy the drop in fish life in our rivers. And also I wild swim, and there was one summer where I wouldn't even get in the river because of the stench of slurry in the water. So yeah, I'm pretty sure that it is as bad as it's reported.
Yes, I do like a good outdoor swim. Nick?
Just to jump in as well, an area that we do a lot of work on, which I've mentioned, is our native white-clawed crayfish. So we work alongside the Environment Agency as well to go outside of our catchment and see rivers that aren't as nice as the Wansbeck, basically, because the Wansbeck's pretty much the best river in Europe for white-clawed crayfish. And literally 7 miles away is the River Blythe, where the invasive American signal crayfish is. They cause problems in a lot of different ways. One of the ways is burrowing. So they burrow into the riverbanks, they cause erosion, they silt up the bottom of the water. And I I got into the River Blythe where these things are, and the riverbanks were, this wasn't in a particularly agricultural area. The riverbanks were completely bare of vegetation. You could not feel any sort of rocky bottom or substrate. It was completely maybe 2-3 foot of silt before you got to anything. And as you were walking, you could feel the sort of crunch of the crayfish as you put each step down, because they can live in such high numbers. And they're one of the only, animals that could ever live in a river in such a poor quality in that. And that's 7 miles away from an a relatively good quality river. So I think rivers absolutely are in as bad a state or worse than is advertised.
So our third question is from Joanna, and she says, is there any research looking at how beaver dams can filter out pollutants from progressing down the rivers?
I
Specific
can't
one.
Yeah, well, I know that there is an awful lot of research coming out of Devon at the moment. That's where there are some real beaver experts, and in the River Otter, where they've got an awful lot. And yes, I can definitely find it. I can't find it off the top of my head, but I've been presented all of their amazing data that they've got kind of before and after. It's very impressive. They've really gone to town on capturing as much data as possible. So that's where I would first look if I was looking for that.
Amazing. Molly, maybe if you could send over a link to anything that's relevant to that, we could maybe send it round in our post event email. Caroline says, do you have, goodness, I realise loads of questions have just come in. Do you have otters on any of the rivers you're on? Yes, from Sam.
Yeah. We've got otters throughout our entire catchment. We were a little bit worried when we first reintroduced the beavers with their kit that the otters might have a little go at the kit because they are known to do that, but the kit has survived and is probably big enough now that the otters will leave it alone. It's lovely on pretty much all of the Wansbeck's tributaries in the catchment. You can see otter spraying everywhere, just chock full of crayfish claws, crayfish heads, little bits of crayfish, which is always lovely to see. Our otter population's really good at the moment, but we also have American mink, which we're trying to control as well, which is another lovely waterway invasive species. But we're working our way towards reducing their numbers because we hope to start to reintroduce water voles, which is another native species that's really struggling. So again, that's all connected.
There's a follow-up there for that question. If so, which is yes, so I think it's probably directed to Nick, how have the otters affected the crayfish populations? Do we know? We've got any data on that?
Again, it's one of these things where crayfish and otter have coexisted for millions of years. They've co-evolved. Otters really love eating crayfish, and if a river's good enough, there will be plenty of crayfish for otters to eat. So that's a completely natural food chain that is meant to be there, meant to happen. It's happened for millions of years.
That's great news. We've got Andy who says he's from the Sheaf and Porter Rivers Trust in Sheffield. The rivers we focus on rise in the Peak District, but after a few kilometres become suburban and urban, and have unfortunately been much abused over the past 200 years or so. Do we have any examples of extensive nature-based solutions for urban rivers? Which is a very good question, Andy. Anyone on the panel have any? We're all quite rural, I think, but I know there are some from my work with the RSPB, some extensive kind of work going on, but I'm not sure if it's in urban areas, but I can go and have a bit of a claw back through notes and see if we do. But anybody off the top of their heads got some urban examples?
Another farm that I work on is based on the River Wey, and that is quite urban. That goes right through Guildford and the like sort of very southeast England towns. I don't know. I know there's been a lot of conversation about it, but I'm not sure. I think it's still at that stage where everyone's hoping we can deliver some cool nature-based solutions, but not yet. So aspirational.
Although the Wansbeck where we are isn't particularly urban, we do have massive footfall because we get like 250,000 visitors a year. So that can throw up the same problems that having a river in an urban area can, because it's just people, isn't it? It's just a lot of people. So we do a lot of work on interpretation. So talking about biosecurity with visitors, particularly around the crayfish. I'm going back to crayfish, sorry. Particularly around the crayfish plague, which American signals spread to our native white claws, pretty similar to the red squirrel, grey squirrel scenario, spreading a disease. So we work a lot on interpretation, biosecurity, moving between rivers, making sure to check clean, dry boots, which is really important when you've got a lot of young families and dogs, and making sure to hose your kids and your dogs down before you go anywhere else, basically. And also nature-based solutions, again, like willow spiling, creating formalized areas of entry to a river, because you know you're never going to stop people going in a river. In an ideal world, you would say keep out, but that's not going to happen, and that's going to reduce enjoyment for our visitors and for people. So we create formalized areas so we can reduce erosion throughout an entire stretch of river to maybe 1 or 2 spots. So it's little solutions like that that are big wins for us in terms of a high traffic area of river.
I love that idea, little areas where we can make sure that people are still getting the joy and inspiration from the space, but without having too high an impact on the actual ecosystem itself. We're at 25 past, so I think I'm going to pass over quickly to Emma, who's going to give us a quick roundup on a very exciting piece of work they've been doing with the Rivers Trust on the Big River Watch, and then I'll bring this to a close.
Oh, thank you very much, Roisin, and thank you, Sam, Molly and Nick. That was fascinating. I thoroughly enjoyed that. Thank you for your time this afternoon, or this evening now, in fact. Gosh, today really has run away with me. Thank you so much. I just thought I'd jump in here and talk to you a little bit, if I'm permitted, about the Big River Watch. It's our citizen science project here at the Rivers Trust, which is tomorrow. Now, we often get asked, we know our rivers are in really, really bad state, but like, what can you and I do about it? The majority of us on this call won't be landowners or land managers, and it can feel really out of our hands as one of those really big problems that we just can't tackle. So one of the things that we would like to put forward as a thing that you can do that can be really useful is the Big River Watch. And all it means is that you need to download the Big River Watch app, and anybody can get involved across the UK or Ireland, and you go and spend 15 minutes or so by your local river this weekend, or perhaps by a new river if there's a space that you'd like to explore. And then you just follow the survey in the app and you tell us what you see. And you tell us things like what plants might be there, what wildlife you've seen, if you see any litter, or if you see any signs of pollution, and also a little bit you ask how you feel and whether you think the river feels natural or artificial. And all of this data we can scoop on up and get a really big, hopefully, a really big, gorgeous picture of what our river health looks like across UK and Ireland. So this data set's going to be really, really huge if we can get lots of people doing it. We're running Big River Watch weekend this weekend. So hopefully we'll get this really big snapshot, and we'll be running it again in the spring so that we can look at it in 2 different seasons. We're also going to keep the survey open year round, so you can get involved and survey your river this weekend. But if you want to tell us what, like next weekend and the weekend after and the weekend after that, then brilliant. Add all of your data to this fantastic data set. And then all of that will be used to help us better understand what the problems are, where they are, and then also to have better data to strengthen all of our campaigns and our asks, particularly of decision makers. Having that data behind us is really, really important for driving a lot of the work that we do. And not just us. The data is going to be publicly available for other NGOs, community groups, journalists, scientists, land managers. Anyone who needs information on the health of our rivers across the UK and Ireland will have access to this information. So we really hope that it will support a lot more future work restoring these vital landscapes. So Big River Watch app, go and download it now. It's completely free, and I can't wait to see all of your data. Thank you.
Amazing, Emma. Thank you so much. And I'd just like to say on behalf of UK Youth for Nature, a huge thanks to the Rivers Trust, because you guys have been fantastic to work with. And I hope that we'll have many more collaborations in the future. And we've got a group of people going out separately all across the UK, hopefully this weekend, to do the Big River Watch ourselves. So please, I implore you to get involved as well, because we do want a massive snapshot of river data so that we can really get a sense of what our rivers look like. But with that, I just like to say thank you to Sam and Molly and Nick. You've all been really inspiring, but also just given us a really good insight into 3 kind of different areas and kind of different, say, ecosystems and kind of economic backgrounds. So thank you very, very much for coming along. I've got lots of positive stuff coming up in the comments, so do give that a read before you hop off. And thanks to everyone for coming. We've loved having you, and hopefully we'll see you all again in a webinar coming to you soon. Thanks. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.